Let your heart be light. Next year all our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year all our troubles will be miles away. Once again, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us will be near to us once more. Someday soon we all will be together if the fates allow. Until then, we'll have to muddle through somehow. And have yourself a merry little Christmas now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys are ready for this holiday season episode. As you may have noticed, it's a little more festive right here today. I did decorate the set a little bit, so we added some Santa hats. I'm sorry for all of you out there that are triggered for the Santa hats. I still love you. We are here to unify around Christ, so please just ignore my imperfections if that's the way you see it. I love you guys. Let's get this episode started. Today we have a special guest I'm pretty excited for. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the one and only Christina Eltrevoog.
Eltrevoog.
Vogue? You actually hit the G at the
Oh,
end?
yeah.
I'm embarrassed because I think I've been saying that wrong my whole life.
It's better than most people.
Really? What do they say? Eltrevoog?
That's one. I've heard Eltrevoog. The telemarketers sometimes would say Edelfrog. Although a neighbor I walked up next to like a few months ago, he said, "Oh yeah, I went to school with your dad. He's an altar frog, right?"
You're like, exactly. Yes,
Altar frog.
It's actually a position in the church. It's an altar frog. It's a. All right, but I want to introduce who you really are to everybody, or at least how I know you, and then let you kind of tell people who you really are. So I actually known you for several years, and I wouldn't say just known you, maybe more known of you, because I knew your brother. I went to school with your brother. Your brother's older. Your brother's significant too. So just so people, if you guys don't know already, for those of you that don't know, Christina is the sister of John Eltrevoog, who is notorious for the morning show at 104.7 WBGL. So when you're hearing John in the morning, you're hearing the brother of our guest today, Christina. So you've been on that too. I actually just heard you on.
Friday,
you
2
were
days
just on
ago.
there. I was like, didn't I just hear you on the radio show?
Yes.
So that's really cool. That's how I know you, though. I actually did school with your brother, and he was like a singer and a performer, and he was. I am not at all surprised he ended up where he's at. Which that didn't fall too far, so it must be a family thing, right? Is your family musical or something? Okay,
Yes,
I figured because
true.
this is how I know you. So I started seeing you because you were my younger brother's, closer to my younger brother's age. And so I started seeing you in choir events, solo events. You would start performing Finest of the Fine Arts. You were constantly on stage or in the spotlight, and not just almost as a background, but actual kind of like as a lead person. And then that never stopped. So from then on, I constantly saw your name around doing community events, doing church events. In fact, you were just here in Marseilles not too long ago. You were doing a music event over at the Nazarene Church. Is that correct?
Yes.
See, you were very connected in the community through family and everything. So I've just always see you around. I always see you. You do worship events. You do secular events, as you could call it. You do whatever it is. You're just there, and you're performing and you're singing, and so that's kind of how I know you. I know you as this like musical talent of the community who also expresses her faith as well. That is just literally probably, I would say, one of the key figure of musical people. Like, come on, like if I had to say like who are the musical people of this area, I'd be like Christina Eltrevoog for sure. Vogue. Christina Eltrevoog. I feel like I'm trying my best. But that being said,
great.
I guess, is that how you would see yourself too, as like a musical person, or do you see yourself as something else? Or
I mean, that is like my primary vocation. Yeah. That's what I spend most of my time, especially in the public. Like that's what I do.
Yeah. I feel like that's literally like, and you do it consistently.
Yeah.
Like you're not kind of like, it's like consistent. Like you really are kind of constantly always busy. You're doing something. You probably have something planned in January, right? You probably already see. I was just guessing, and I was just. So yeah. So you are. It's not like it's just an accident. You're very intentional with this. So let me ask you. You just did that church event at the Nazarene church like that. So clearly you're comfortable being able to, do worship music, at a church and stuff like that, and then pop up and then do, just like singer, songwriter, whatever, normal music. I don't want to, normal music, just music where you would play it at a community event or wherever, because you are quite versatile. I've literally seen you at like community events and just state parks, community parks, like just randomly all over. That being said, do you find that at this point in your life, is it easy to just do that, like as a Christian and stuff like that? Do you find that that's more of your calling, or like, do you feel like that's kind of what makes you, I feel like that's what makes you special, that you are not just secluding yourself or sequestering yourself to this Christian community, and instead, I'm seeing you actually not only invest in the Christian community, but also in community in general, stepping outside of the church, which I think is cool. Like, I don't just get to see you on a worship band. Like, I don't just get to, if you want to see Christina, you have to go to this church and see her sing on stage at this church. Rather, you're putting yourself out there. So that's kind of what I'm curious about. I would want to start kind of maybe with your testimony. Like, first of all, were you always a Christian or raised in a Christian family? So I feel like yes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I was raised in a very devout, ardent, Christ-loving family.
All like grandma and grandpa too and stuff?
Yeah. So my mom's father, so he would have been my great-grandfather.
Yeah.
They were from Norwegian families in Minnesota. So he was like first gen born in America.
Wow.
And he became a pastor.
Okay.
A Lutheran pastor in a country rural setting.
Yeah.
And eventually he took a call to serve as a pastor at Bethel Lutheran Church on the west side over by Handy Foods.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that moved the family to Ottawa. So that was kind of our Ottawa origin story. And his sons were like, some of them were already in the military. So it was basically, my grandma was, I think, 19 when she moved here. And so he was also a musical pastor. So he wasn't just a pastor, a speaker, but he was a singer. We still have some tapes, like cassette tapes of him.
For those of you that don't know what those are, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yes. So he was like, I guess in Minnesota, his father was a furniture salesman, and he would help him. They also had an instrument store.
Okay.
In this furniture store. They would sell instruments, and he would learn how to play them and play them for the customers to like sort of entice them to. So that was how he learned to play them. And so he played a bunch of string instruments. But on those cassette tapes, it was mostly like auto harp and stuff. But he led a string band at Bethel back in the day. Wow. I wish I could have been around to see that. I'm like, I would have loved to play in the string band. This is a cool legacy.
I didn't realize there was such a legacy, but this is awesome. Keep going.
Yeah. So, and my grandma also played in a string band. And there's a boarding school with the Lutheran Brethren Church called Hillcrest in Minnesota. So she traveled around with this string band. But eventually when they moved the family to Ottawa, she became like the organist there. I don't know if she was originally playing piano or if it was organ, but she became the organist. When my mom eventually came around, she played piano. So they were kind of the duo team, the dynamic duo of pianist and organist. And my brother really followed in that suit of being a piano guy.
Sure did.
But he's more of he plays by ear mostly. I mean, he could read notes, I'm sure, but they're like total note readers. Like you just give them a hymn. They've never read it before. Not me either.
I was the one standing next to the people not reading the sheet music, but listening to what they were singing and then just memorizing it.
Yes,
so I knew what to do.
Yes, that was me at piano lessons as well. I was like, can you play it? And then just trying to remember, like in the days before YouTube, it was like, how did that go? She played it. That was me.
That's so funny. Teachers used to actually make cassettes of like things for you to listen to. Like, do you remember that? I don't know if they ever did that. Like Mr. Am.
CDs for sure.
They did CDs with you?
Yeah,
okay, well, they upgrade. I'm not trying to date myself right now, but no, yeah. So he would make cassettes, maybe CDs. I don't know, but that was.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I still have those. Yeah.
Do you really? That's so funny.
For IMEA and everything. Yes.
Okay, sorry, I distracted you. You were mentioning your brother went down that route. He was listening by ear, and then I ADD'd you, which I apologize for because that will happen again.
No, it's just conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you guys are all musical. It sounds like even Christian raised and stuff like that. So would you say that you would say you've been a Christian your whole life? Is that what you'd say? Like,
I was certainly raised with the teachings of the Bible.
Did you
very much.
Find that there was like a rebellious stage or like a stage where you're like, I'm not sure, or going through doubt and stuff like that? Or I'd love to hear about that, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So it all started actually in a
long ago
in a choral setting, actually in a musical setting. So there was the Friendly City Sound Choir. Do you remember FCS? So I remember I tried to try out for that when I was in 3rd grade, but they turned me away. They're like, nope, you got to be in 4th grade. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I loved Friendly City Sound, the children's choir in our town. And I was in maybe 4th or 5th grade. There was a couple girls who I became friends with, who I remember they became like close friends. And I would go over to one of their houses. And I remember the first time walking in, I think it was the first time, and hearing what I now know was Insane Clown Posse.
What is this?
I know. And I was just like, wow, I've never heard music like this before. You know, I was listening
to... The first thing I heard like that, it was Sublime. Like I was Christian music, and then I heard Sublime, and I was like, never heard this kind of music before. But
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember I was very like shocked. And I was very much a 90s pop kid.
That's funny.
You know, Christina Aguilera, NSYNC, all of that. Not to say that was like angelic music by any means, you know, but it was definitely more, it was less overt, you know, in its, in you know, the things it talked about.
especially this day and age, it's gotten, I mean, ours isn't, we're not perfect. In fact, sometimes if you revisit some of those old songs, you might listen to it and go, oh, that was actually way worse than I thought it was.
Yes,
like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I've definitely done that. I'm like, oh, that song was terrible. I had no idea. It was, now hearing that with new ears,
yes,
catching that.
Yeah. We didn't know in elementary school all of the like metaphors, you know, the double entendres and everything. But anyway, so yeah, heard ICP and was just like, oh my goodness. And then, but it was just kind of like, it wasn't too long before like I knew all the words to those songs or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember, well, it's funny because I was recently reading an autobiography of Gandhi, and he says in this as a quote that he remembers in his adolescence where he took up a friendship on the basis of reform, and he felt like he wanted to reform this friend. He like had a compassion for them, and I think I've definitely had that notion like at various times in my life of like, oh, I think I could help this person or whatever. But he says, I don't know exactly how he says it, but he says that, you know, the man takes in vice much more quickly than virtue. Yeah. And so it was very much more like I was the one being influenced more than I was influencing. Maybe
you had an influence, but it wasn't as much as you were being influenced.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that that's also says something to like, especially when as a person who seeks to follow God, I believe that it's very important to have an open and receptive heart. And I think that's the thing that ends up getting us manipulated.
Yeah, it gets us
because we're so open and we want to say, you know, what do you have to teach me?
Right.
Though I will say that like also going through those things is a part of how he teaches us, you know? So even though like maybe we were also opening ourselves up to other things in the long run, I think there's a greater plan, you know?
For me, it's like, well, you know, we've all heard the saying, bad company corrupts good morals, right? So that is essentially a play on exactly what you're kind of describing there. Like we're coming in there, we're trying to be the influence of good morals, but essentially that can be, you know, a situation that you find yourself manipulated, deceived, or even making, you know, those wrong choices. I do believe that God redeems those, you know, because when you persevere, you know, I'm not saying it's perfect. This is not perfect relationship, but when you persevere with Christ, that those moments you just described are really the things that help define us later, that help us have more empathy, you know, even for other people that are outside of the faith, like because you recognize where you were, all of that. So these are the things that ultimately become, what do you want to say? So experiences can be like knowledge, and knowledge can be a pearl, and this pearl of wisdom can essentially be a treasure. So I guess you could say like these are help build the treasures in our lives that we're essentially able to help others with, you know, for giving out these pearls. You have wisdom in this situation, and empathy, right? So there might be a Christian that would never have even gotten themselves involved at all in a situation where ICP was playing. You know what I'm saying? Like you walk into the room, they hear Insane Clown Posse, and they're like, all right, I'm out. And therefore there's no influence or no light in the darkness. The problem is like you said, especially when we're young and in our faith and we're still figuring things out ourselves and we're susceptible to influence. You said influenced by reform influenced by reform. So even when we're trying to do that, essentially that's happening to us too. Which is also why it's really good to, you know, be in church and stuff. Just as a side note, because that fellowship, that Christian community is a part which brings you back to accountability. You know, like maybe when you are starting to go down this little bit of a path, because you are trying to help someone, you are trying to be the light in the darkness. If you're forsaking altogether Christian community, or if that Christian community isn't authentic, you would find yourself again alone in that situation, and therefore susceptible to that kind of manipulation or whatever it is. Just influence. You know, it's sometimes and it's interesting that you said it was through music, because I feel like that's true for a lot of people, whether they realize it or not. Even in my way, I wouldn't have said music was part of Actually, I might have said that. Actually, if I actually sat down and thought about this, but music definitely helped play a part of like, in the same way that you can use music to worship God and glorify him, and it's such a beautiful and powerful thing, it can also do that to you like in secular ways. Like what you do open yourself up to definitely plays an influence. And for me, it wasn't just like the music or lyrics or something like that, but it was actually a lifestyle that I started to live in the music world, and performing all the time. And even though I was a Christian in a non-Christian band, you know, it started off lots of Christian ethics, no drugs. We're a no drug band. We're a no cussing band. We don't even use profanity. Like, so we're not trying to be straight edge, even though I'm pretty sure what it was called back then. But what ended up happening was that lifestyle still, like okay, I can give it to you like this. So we're talking about like Christian influence versus secular influence. Well, think of it like this. We were a pop band. We were a pop band. Like we're straight, like pop rock. We're pop rock. But all the bands around us were metal and heavy. So what happened was you play more and more shows with them. You're exposed to this audience, this metal audience. They still like us because we sing, but we're also not like, and they're used to that, right? They're used to like flexing and tight muscles and this, and we're just like, you guys want to sing, like, so because of that, it actually started to affect us. So we'd be like, oh, in this song while we're writing, let's write a breakdown. And the breakdown would be like, so we're singing, and now it's like, yeah. And it affected how we wrote. And then all of a sudden we're writing songs that are more heavier, and now it has double bass. And it affected because of the bands we constantly were on tour with or playing shows with. And so even that, right? So that played an effect on the actual music. But what it actually affected too was our actual lifestyle. Like, drinking started more, partying started happening more, our after parties started happening more, our conversations started getting more vulgar, and what the version we presented to ourselves publicly wasn't necessarily the version that we were presenting to ourselves privately. Like on stage, there's no profanity. Off stage, there was no limits to our profanity. So it was more of like, oh, we got to be good role models when we're on stage, but when we're off stage, now we don't have to be good role models, and we live in the world. So again, music actually played a huge part of my role of my backsliding, of like me knowing God, raised Christian family, awesome musical, all of the thing, very similar. My parents were involved in ministry and leading and all that, but so it wasn't like I didn't stop believing in God. It was more like I stopped walking with him. Like I would never be like, I don't believe in God. I would be like, oh, I totally believe in God. I love God. I'm a Christian. As I go and do whatever I want, just like, and I wasn't. I was living a double life. So music definitely opened the door to that as well, because even the songs I was listening to, there was music that I was listening to that I never would have listened to before. Screaming. I'm a singer, I come from like Mr. Am world, like, oh, like, what I'm saying? We're coming from like trained and singing and like, you go head voice, this chest voice, and then you go and join a band and they're like, we just want you to, and I'm like, you can't do that. You ruin your voice. Oh. Like, you don't scream. You can't do that. Like, and then even in our songs, we started adding it, and I'd be like, no, let's go. And I'd start to scream too. And like, just as much as like, I'm not saying any of that is inherently evil. By the way, I'm not saying screaming in songs is inherently evil. Yes. In fact, as an aside, I like, some Christian metal has been so influential in my life, and I like with the themes and lyrical and very deep. Yeah. And who do you listen to? Just out of curiosity, just one or two. Showbread was one. Okay. Do you know Showbread at all? I know. I've heard them open for, or they played with Holy Lamb. Is Holy Lamb? That's the name of the other band, right? It's got the Brian Welsh, who was in, why can't I get this? The guy with the dreads. Slipknot? Slipknot. He was in Slipknot, right? And his name's Brian Welsh or something. And he's a guitar player in a band, and I think the name is Holy Lamb. and I
Never
saw
listened
them.
to 'em.
Oh, really? You might really like them. They're super good. You might actually really like them. Like, again, but see, now this version of me, by the way, this version of me totally would listen to a song like "Let's Go."
Yes.
You know, there was just a song that was on the getting kind of ridiculed. It was Christian metal. I don't know anything about the band. I don't know anything about them. I just saw that they were on mainstream news because they performed on Jimmy Kimmel, and it was metal, and it was Christian metal, and so they're like,
nice.
yeah. So like it was like singing or something, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Sacrifice," and like people were like, ah! Like the audience didn't even know how to handle it. Like they were like, it wasn't because it was Christian. It was just because it was just metal at that point. But yeah, no, this version of me would totally like I'm now. It was weird. I had to go through these stages, like even with music. Like I stopped listening to music, like world music, for a while. I had to like fast from it and just do worship music, and that's all it was for like years. But then there was like, you get to a different part of your faith anymore where that is no longer a stumbling block. It was because it was like being an addict or something, right? You don't mess with something when you were an addict. Well, it helped lead to a lot of things in my life. So I had to like step away from music for a second, reorientate, get my walk back with God. And then I was able to like, oh, okay. And then I could, listen to just normal songs again, love songs, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden I'm like, and it wasn't like, I never was like in a stage where I was like, that's evil. It was just like, it's best for me not to listen to a breakup song or a love song or just a good classic rock song or anything. Which is so funny because if you didn't know this, you will know I've been a DJ for years, which is like, I'm literally playing songs I would never play, like because I'm being asked or requested. And I learned so much about music as a DJ, because I really didn't listen to any secular music at all. People would be like, "Oh, do you know the song by AC/DC?" And I'd be like, "No." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "No, I don't know. I didn't listen to AC/DC. Like, what about this or like you name it. Start going down that Journey, Led Zeppelin." I'm like, no, didn't listen to any of it. Wow. And then I just started learning about it like after high school and in the music, and I started learning about all this other music, and then DJing, and then I learned about classic music because it's constantly requested in bars, and I learned every bar song you can imagine as a DJ. And so there was a lot like of how music played a role, and so I think that's true for a lot of people. So do you think that do you find that music, because you said you kind of like ICP'd there for a while.
Yeah.
So
the ICP phase, I never got really into that. That was never really my thing. But
just learn the lyrics.
Guilty by association. But no, I did really get into rap though. I got into rap and hip hop and a lot of the really crude stuff. I was like speaking in Ebonics and everything.
Oh, really?
It was very very much like there was some weird like gang affiliation stuff too. Not really like that. But so
this is surprising.
Those friends.
Did you just say you had gang affiliation?
Well, not necessarily me, but like the friends that I was hanging out with did.
Your circles changed.
Yeah. Well, and the thing was, I think partly my view on it now is that really I was very hungry and eager for close friendship, that I feel like I experienced that a little bit prior to 4th, 5th grade, but not like, you know how when your classes change, like you don't have that same person in your class anymore or whatever. And so it shakes things up. I feel like, and it's at that stage where, the like pre-puberty, whatever, it's like you're really going through a lot, whatever. And I think that I see that what was happening, I think, is that in the church setting, there was not that I had experienced thus far. There wasn't a whole lot of like down to earthness, I guess you would say, like real talk and like transparency and like, you know what I mean? It was very.
Well, I think I know what you mean because I feel like that's a really true thing. I do feel like that's true. It
was very kind of abstracted, and that's not to say that like the teachings were wrong or anything. It was just the lived quality and
how it applied to your life versus how it was taught.
Just the ability to talk about real subjects that matter to teenagers that they're facing. It was almost like, kind of like the idea of we want to shelter kids from evil that's out there. It's like, well, if you don't talk with them about it, they're going to find it out not through you. They're going to find it out through their own experiences because they're facing it and they're trying to figure it out. And so I think it is, I don't
like an overprotection kind of thing, which leads to like essentially you were not getting to be authentic. You felt like when you were at church, you were actually putting on and I'm not really blaming anyone for that, but I would say that, like, as a kid, I believe it's not really your place to like be the leader, like as a kid, you're by nature following the example of that people are setting before you. And I hadn't seen, except for my father. My father was very good at this. He was very much like an open book and like confess all of his sins to someone who he might not even know very well, but like, because he feels this like burden of needing to be real and transparent about his life, which I get that.
I always appreciated that, which a lot of people thought like, man, it's a little too much. And I felt like that at times. And I'm not saying that it's always the right way to be without reservation, but I am saying that I think we can also, in our effort to try to be a good role model, be a little too out of touch, or feel like we're not approachable or like we wouldn't understand.
Everything seems a little too sanitized. Like if we're trying to have like a conversation and that conversation is dirty. We got to get dirty in this conversation. It's a Christian conversation, but it's dirty. Okay. Christians a lot of time will approach it in a very sanitized version. Like even how you're talking about it. I feel like I can relate with your dad on that, like to a fault, where I feel like sometimes I'm vulnerable to the point where I'm just putting out like, oh, here's all my sins. Here's where I fail. And like, I'm just, and it's almost like, there's a humility to it, but it's beyond that. Like I'm actually just trying to like to a fault where I'm like, there's people would be like, maybe you shouldn't tell everybody everything like that. Like, or like, this person, and I'm just like, but I don't know. I'm not.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just putting it out there and if I'm casting pearls before swine, God forgive me. But
and there is a way that I think you can still be very self-absorbed in airing out all of your burdens because it's still about you.
Right.
There is a way that you can,
and all of
that.
There's
still a way about that. But I will say that there's a quality of it that can be disarming because you're not trying to be pretentious. You're not putting up this thing of like trying to make yourself look better than you actually are.
Right.
And so I would say that was where, that era in life was sort of where that tendency, I was offered, that tendency of coping with,
these struggles of church and what's real, and it doesn't feel real there, and yet you're getting more authentic, real experiences with your friends and your these. How old are you? You're like
I'm 34.
Grade? No, I meant in the story.
Yeah, and in the story, I was like 11, 12 years old.
Okay, so you're
and
preteen.
I will say that they were good friends. Like they, in the sense of like, we'd spend all this time together. We could, we got each other, and I just felt known. Yeah. And I think that was where this time when I realized how important it is for a kid, anybody, an adult, to have the experience of being known, like where someone understands like who you are and your what you like, what you don't like, gets your humor. It was just this really intimate kind of feeling. And also then when you add on top of it like kind of illegal things, it gives you even this closer feeling of bond because it's like, no one else knows. It's just us,
Secrets, trauma, bonding, all of it. We're together, bro. We came.
Exactly.
That's your gang, by the way. Remember, guys, she said she was in a gang. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So this is like pretty preteen kind of age. Was there a time period where, when did it happen where you finally, because you're talking about feeling known by these people, when did it happen that you felt actually known by God? Like, when did it happen where like God actually does know me, my humor, my everything, my all the things that you just described? Like, when did that relationship, not just the I'm a Christian, I was raised a Christian, I go to church, I sing songs. Like, when did it happen? You know.
Well, there's a couple significant times. One, when I was 15. So by the time I was like 14, 15, I had been smoking cigarettes for a few years. And it wasn't even so much that habit as it was like what it represented in my life was this kind of duplicity, this kind of being one way with some people, being one way with other people.
Were your parents aware? Like, what I mean is like, is this a rebellious stage or are you playing a dual role?
It's definitely like
a rebellious stage.
Not outwardly rebellious.
So like it's like in front of my parents, I'm a good kid. Yeah. But I'm also living this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah. I never.
It was I'm smoking cigarettes, Dad. You don't get this.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I was never like, that.
I would never do that, Dad. I would never. And then you go off to your friends.
Oh yeah.
Got it.
And yes, and so, but I had this realization at some point that like that was not, it was actually like I was given weed by somebody when I was maybe 14, and I had this experience where I felt I got very paranoid to the point of I felt like
panic attack.
It was panic attack-ish. Yeah, it was like it was weird because it was like I knew what people were going to say, what was going to come out of their mouth before they said it. That's
you're like,
and so I was like, no, I know what you're going to say. And then they would say it and I'd be like, whoa, you know, I was so, but I ended up like throwing up in the toilet at a downtown club and
praying, God, I'll never do this again.
Well, what I realized at that point was like, this is not who I am. Okay. I'm like, this is just not who I am. This is not who I am. This is not who I want to be, this person. So I took the rest of the bag and threw it off the bridge, which there probably would have been better ecological things to do with that. But
no one's complaining. No one's complaining.
But at that point, that was when I kind of realized that I needed to not just change like on the outside, you know, in this like way of you go to church on Sunday and kind of, or go to summer camp and rededicate your life or whatever. It was like, no, I really just need to get real with my life. You know?
This is like 15 years old, 16 years old? Okay.
Yeah. And so I was invited to an Ash Wednesday service at what is now Crossbridge, but it was the Nazarene church before.
First Church of the Nazarene.
Yes. And I went into like the teenager room and they had their own version of the Ash Wednesday service. And that was where I'm like, okay, I'm going to quit smoking. Like this is it. And that was it for me. Like that was
who invited you? I'm just curious.
It was Nick Wangler.
Okay.
Actually.
Wow.
So Nick, if you ever see this, changed my life.
That's so funny.
He was also on speech team at Ottawa.
Brian Wrangler was his dad. He was the pastor there. He was an awesome pastor. He was the pastor there when we when we first arrived in Illinois from Germany. So that is how I know Brian and stuff like that. So he's a pretty cool guy. I think we're still friends on Facebook. Hi, Brian. Hey, Brian. We don't really talk, but hi.
So, and the Ash Wednesday to me really like like I knew that, okay, I'm not just going to like give something stupid up. Like, I'm like, I need to like give up the thing that actually has a hold on my life that is like keeping me in this way of being where I'm like, I know that if I follow this trajectory, like I'm not going to end up in the place where I want
So
to
do you
be.
feel like cigarettes were actually a symptom of something else? Like when you're giving up cigarettes, it wasn't
really,
cigarettes.
Yeah, it was more so like the kind of person that I was being.
It was a lifestyle.
And it was like that duplicitous way of being. Like that I just...
you were dual-minded.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, but am I?
And yeah, just the whole like, I didn't want to be like fake, you know. I didn't want to have to feel this weight of I knew that I had like I was just putting on a mask, you know. And also like that, just as this is sort of like a I I don't know what you would call it.
Segue.
Well, or just planting the seed for more conversation later. That
Well, we like that seed of faith here, so you can plant seeds.
Yes,
we like seeds.
yes, scatter them. This also had. There's a whole parallel also with makeup for me, and the
beauty world.
Metaphor of that, but also like a true parallel of like throughout my adolescence and my relationship with makeup, and also how my actual body and skin, the condition and quality and health of my skin versus like the face that I was putting on. And I was ever since 5th grade, probably, that was when I started wearing makeup, which is interesting because that was also this, that time in my life when I started kind of like having this split between what was really true and what was being presented.
You're making me have deep thoughts right now. I have a daughter, and she's 12. And so this is the world we're exploring right now, like where of like eyeshadows and you know, I'm not into red lipsticks, you know, but little tints, and I'm always trying to be like subtle honey, subtle. but yes, we're getting into this world of this beauty and what's motivating it in her. I'm always trying to make sure like whatever's motivating this desire to do the beauty and the makeup and stuff is coming from something creative and fun rather than something like pressure and insecurities or like, oh, I hate my eyelash. I have to have mascara on because I hate my eyelashes. Well, now I've heard her say that. And that to me is opening a door. I'm like, how do I approach it? I'm a guy. I'm a dad.
Right.
I'm a dad. So I'm trying to like, I'm a girl dad, but I'm trying to like, and as a man, you know, I may
it's
have
harder
a very
for you
binary
to say that because it's like, well, that's easy for you to say because you're not, you know, it's not common for men to wear makeup.
I know her friends are, and there's that pressure thing, right? Like that friends through reform, and they're wearing makeup and they're doing, you know, all kinds, and I'm also trying to like not overprotect. Right? Not be the part where I'm like, absolutely no makeup. And then it creates some sort of thing in her where she like later down the line, it's going to be like rebellious to a state of like whether, we all like to think our kids would never do anything rebellious, but come on. I think we all just sat here and discussed that's exactly what happens. We're just hoping that the case is exactly what was in your case, that when you're raised in the ways of the Lord, your parents, your grandparents, all of that, putting those seeds in you all throughout your life, that eventually you got to a point where you said, this is not who I am. So it's very interesting that you recognize that there's a version of you that you should have been or should be, and that recognized in that moment where you're like, this is not who I am. I'm giving this stuff up. I'm living a duplicity life. This is not who I am. And you had to start finding your identity back in Christ rather than like all these choices. And you remember how in the beginning of this conversation I said, something along about like music and the past and all these experiences create who we are today. And you said something along the line like that's helped you be who you are. That's totally true. This is our testimony. But then getting our identity in Christ is like a whole nother journey of like when we actually realize who we are. When we stop being like, who am I? Like, am I saved? Or like when we start to really like, I am a child of God. Like I am loved. Like I know who I am, and I am far from perfect, and I need Jesus bad, but I know who I am, and I don't walk around in this other identity that I can easily find myself in when I catch myself in the flesh. And just as we get older, we get better at it. It's not like we get perfect, but we do get better at all of this. But I'm curious to so you had this point where you realized that that's not who you wanted to be, so you gave up these things. You got invited to church, which is why we should be inviting people to church, people.
And just to be clear, like I already had my own church where I went to. I had a youth group, all those things, but I was still invited, you know. And sometimes for me, those have been some of the most significant things. Was when I got out of my sort of familiar environment where I'm used to playing games and I'm used to the familiar faces and the routine. Yeah, it's easy to like slot into, oh, I know how to play this role, you know? And I was able to be have something else open, you know?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think you're opening this is also why, and I wouldn't suggest this for everybody, but personally in my life, because I've done the whole, like, as for me, you know, like, you go to church and then there's a point in sometimes Christians' lives where they're like, church is not a building. We don't like, and I don't, wherever two or more are gathered, that's church. And then they just leave it at that. And they no longer go to any church, and they just kind of basically forsake going to church. And they're like, I have Bible study and I do this on my own, and I read devotionals, and I talk to my sister on the phone. That's church for us, you know, like, and I'm like, no, that's definitely not how it was described in the Bible. But, what happened is, like, for me, I kept running into problems in churches, right? Like, this church's message is crazy, or there's all this drama, and there's an affair. And so, like, whatever's going on, church's drama, and I never can find this church, right? And so then I stopped going to church, because the last church for a while, I got kicked out. I'll try to make this quick story, because I want to hear you talk, not me. But I got kicked out.
I want to hear what your story is too. So
I got kicked out of a church, and a long story short, I was on the worship team. I had holes in my pants. They asked me not to wear the jeans with holes in it.
You're like, but these are my holy jeans.
Well, right. I was ready to do a dad joke there so bad. But no, and really, actually, I was, like, kind of offended in the sense of, like, and truth be honest, I didn't have a lot of money back then when they were saying that. And that was just, like, my fashion based off of, like, this was all I can afford fashion. So, like, when your jeans started getting holes in it, it wasn't, like, because I was buying it that way. It was just because that's what happened. And I was just making it look good. At least I thought. But anyways, I didn't get kicked out for wearing the holes in the jeans. I got kicked out because I spoke up. And I spoke up via, this is a blog that I had. It was called Wisdom by Failure. And I didn't call the church out. I was just like, churches judge too much by how things look. And, you know, how sad is it that someone goes, if I go to church with you on Sunday, do I have to dress up? Like, if just the fact that they're asking that and not that come as you are is really there. Like, and I understand the difference between, I was on the worship team, but it was the fact that they were like, yeah, but you're a professional Christian. And that was the words that were actually used, like, on the paper, like professional Christian. And I was like, what? So I was, like, offended, you know, and like, and I stated that in my little blog, and then I went into church that next week, and they were like, you're no longer welcome to worship with us. And then they walked me out of the church. And so from then I was like, I'm glad churches exist, but as for me, church has left the building. Like, now I don't go to church anymore. Like, you know, like, I'm not. And that was only a season, because then God called me back into the church, and it's so good. And my view of, like, that post-church life where people are like, oh, I don't go to church. I'm like, even if you don't have a single church, like, what I would recommend doing is visit multiple churches like that. And that's what actually I've done. I would go, like, 3 weeks to one, 4 weeks to one, you know, and I would do it, and then I'd rotate, and I'd be doing it. And it was I got so much more out of it. Like, I didn't get stuck in any routine, and I constantly got to new people. And I don't know. Maybe it's kind of like how you do your music, where you're just jumping around everywhere, and you're just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It was, for me, I was finding more networking and connection and more fellowship, and by going to multiple churches. But I also can see that there are perks to just being, like, locked into one, where like, you can get a really tight knit family that does life together. It is a little harder to do life together when you're just visiting. And I do think doing life together is what church is really about, you know, being authentic. Doing life together means the down and dirty, not the sanitized. And so that's the way I genuinely feel. But so you got invited back to a church. You had the identity thing. What I'm wanting to, like, bring it back to is that point where I said, when did you feel known? Like, when did you go, like, where God knowing you became sufficient, where that was no longer where you're trying to be known by people anymore, and like, where God, like, being known by God really is sufficient. Like, that was the moment where you're like, man, I'm sold out for this. Like, like, is that something that happened recently, a while ago, or?
So when I was 18, I moved from Ottawa to Los Angeles and Burbank. So my cousins were freelance film folks. Wow. And
your whole family.
Because of the theatrical life at Ottawa, I was very persuaded that I wanted to pursue a life in
entertainment,
like production of some sort, like not really I was not a technical person, but I wanted to be involved in the storytelling aspect of, because I noticed that with films, as with music, they have this capacity to touch people's hearts in a way that like we normally walk around a lot more guarded, you know, but in the quiet of like a really good story and a really, like there's something of truth that can be conveyed to us and that's deeper than just like these lines or these adages that have been told to us our whole lives. It's like maybe we've been told those things, but like they fail to like strike an epiphany in us.
In the heart. Like music and film can bypass the mind and all the blocks we have up here and go straight to the heart. Like music can go straight to the heart. Scene or something in movie or film telling, proper storytelling can go bypass the mind and go straight to the heart.
Yes.
And I do feel that connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what I really felt like in my senior year, as I was praying and contemplating about what should I do, going on college visits, all that stuff. I reached out to my cousins and told them I was interested in film, and they were like, well, if that's what you want to do, this is the place to be. And so they totally remade their whole garage into like a little studio for me, like a place to live. And I homeschool taught their kids and nannied them, and that was, so I sort of worked for them, and then they provided this awesome landing place for me to be. And
like coming out of high school and
yeah. So I worked for the Times newspaper that summer, and then in like around Labor Day I drove out there with my mom and started living. This is for later. Started living there. And so there's a really interesting story about this next phase where do you remember Adriana Lisette? Did you ever go to school with her? She was another Ottawan who was involved with the church on the south side, or I think she was also in Foursquare or Assemblies of God. Anyway, she's like
churches.
My brother's age.
Gotcha.
She was, or around that. She went to high school with, and she also had this CD that she made while she was in high school. And I had met her actually at a cast party for the Ottawa Youth Theater.
Cast parties.
Cast party, yes.
I got stories.
Oh, I bet.
That's a different podcast.
She played at, this was for the Ottawa Youth Theater in the summer after my 8th grade year. She played a set or some songs or something, and I was like, oh, I have your CD at home. And I thought it was so cool that she was like this young person already had a CD, and like I listened to it and everything from Ottawa.
Right.
And so for some reason, while I was getting ready to move to LA, I hadn't thought about her in 4 years. Like I met her before I entered high school, and then I hadn't really thought of her, never saw her again. And then her name just popped into my mind, Adriana Lisette. I was like,
man, that name is ringing bells every time you say it, and I have no idea why. I must know her.
Oh, yeah. You're going to go look her up.
Yeah, and I'll see it, and then I'll be like, oh, duh. I'm terrible with names, so I don't even know my own cousins' names. I'm sorry, fam. Sorry. I love you guys. I promise. I'm just terrible. So
you could do your research. It's all remediable.
Thank God for social media.
So, yeah, and at this time I was on Facebook, even back in the day,
MySpace.
2007. MySpace. So her name, but this was in the OG, like old days of Facebook.
Yeah.
And so when her name popped up, I was like, let's just see like if I can find her. Like what's she up to these days? I was just wondering. Didn't have any thought of her being in California, but her location said Burbank, California, and that's where I was moving to. I was like, what's the chances that this person, I think of them and they're living in the place where I'm going to move to? And so I sent her a message and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me at all. We met like 4 years ago this one time.
I said hi once.
Basically. And she messages me back and she's like, oh yeah, I remember you. And I told her I was moving there and she's like, oh, that's great. And so we were talking and she's just like, she throws out of the blue I hadn't asked her about a church, but she's just like, hey, if you're looking for a church there, I recommend Media City Church in Burbank. And so by the time, like, you know, there was a gap in our messages. So by the time I got that, it wasn't until I was actually living there. Right. And I had visited another church, and I remember going there, and this was kind of like an artsy church where like a lot of the more creative people went. And I went there and I just felt like nothing. No, I felt very like, okay, I can tell this is like a cool place to be, but I didn't feel very like you
didn't feel the power of God moving like that?
More so I just didn't feel like I knew that if I wanted to get involved there, I was going to have to really make the effort to like, I was going to have to go seek them out and try to get plugged in. And I hadn't written it off trying again, but then she sent me this message of go to this place. And so I went there, and it was like an experience that I had never had before in terms of like, I don't know if my heart was just like, there was some cultivation going on prior to entering the room, but as soon as I entered the room, it was like there was just an incredibly different, noticeably different you might say energy if you're a spiritual person.
Some people call it the Holy Spirit. You're like,
yeah,
I just felt the Holy presence of the Holy Spirit.
I really did, and it was like a quality of character that was so humbling to me and so penetrating and real, and partly I think also I was observing that the people there, I could just tell there was a sincerity of heart that I really wanted to have, but I knew that I did not have this pure of heart that these people had. Oh, okay. And I really, like, they were just hands in the air, like very worshiping God from this place of like true felt need. Right. Like they felt truly like they needed God, like they wanted God. If they were being real with themselves, right. They were being real. They were letting this vulnerable state that I was only used to getting to on my very own solitude. Like I was very, in my own private world. Like I could.
And you saw Dad do it all the time without a filter.
Yeah,
but that's it. You didn't see it in church like that. I didn't corporately.
And there was a lot of times, that's not to say that like I had never experienced like a charismatic worship before, but I think there was also, there's a difference just between being very demonstrative and expressive versus your heart being like totally just floored and open. Right. And that's what I felt when I went in there, and I was like, I want that. That's what I need in my life. I want to become that kind of person who can be just honest before the Lord, and before people too. And there was just things that were coming to mind during the music, during the worship, and then a guy gets up after the worship and he gives a word from the Lord. And it was like exactly what I had been thinking about. Right. It was exactly what was on my mind. And I just start laughing because I'm just like, that. What?
Come on, God. I've done that. Yeah. I've definitely laughed at his perfect timing.
It was almost like, it's almost like when someone gives a great solo, like an improvised guitar solo or something, and you're just like, how are you, like, you're just that good. You're just that good, and I should have known. You just and I felt like this is true spirituality to me, where it's not this like, we're gonna look like good people and we're gonna put on this nice show and we're gonna like really try to make you look like a good person. It was like, no, a real spirituality is when my needs are actually being met by God, and they don't know anything about them. Like they don't know what I need to be doing. Knows. Yeah, God knows. And that was where I felt like my first
God knew you, like this is the moment he's showing you, like, I know you. I know your heart. No one said this out loud. This was in your heart, and I just talked to you, girl.
Yeah, and that was like the beginning of this journey of getting to experience
a relationship where he's showing you
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm present. I'm here. I'm knowing you. I know you. I'm gonna that thing that you didn't know you need, but because you're seeking me, I'm gonna show you, like that kind of stuff. Man, that's cool. That's actually really encouraging to hear, because I feel like that's sort of relatable probably for some people that have probably been there, where you're actually more vulnerable than ever because now you're actually living in LA. There's no more protection of the parents necessarily over you or any of that. You've spread your wings. You've unnested from mom and dad.
And this is something my dad always used to say. Like, I remember we had a great time of prayer in the car before I moved, like, and he was always into that, like, love to just sit in the car in some random place, like,
and pray
and have a prayer time. And that was like stuff we would do. And I remember it was a very yeah.
I like your dad. He sounds just like me.
It was great. And I remember he was just, give her a double portion of your Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
And he would say, like, it was very much like a releasing prayer too, where he was saying, in
your hands now, Lord.
God is your father.
Yeah.
And that's been true the whole time,
right.
But it's especially true now, like, that he's the one who's going to be there for you, and who's
always.
Yeah. And I remember that so much. And my dad really, I think, took a lot of personal comfort in that, because there was a lot of seasons when he felt like he was not doing a good job as a father.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that word was like both a comfort to me and to himself, because it was like,
that's deep.
Reminding him that, like, no, like, she belongs to you, and that, yes, I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to fail. And there's going to be times where she needs to learn, not from my example, like, she needs to learn from the people that God will put in her life.
Yeah.
And he loved to hear about.
You just trust God. You just got to trust God, right? You just go, okay, I trust you, God.
Yes.
That's really awesome.
Yes.
Let's say, so full circle, like that happened in LA. You had an experience. Eventually, you brought you back out here. You're back out here now. So what brought you out to back to Illinois Valley?
Yeah. So that church that I was a part of, and that man who gave the word from the Lord, he was the young adults pastor at the church at that time.
Gotcha.
And that day after the church service, this was like the contrast between this place and where I had the other place I had visited.
Oh, that's right.
I just went up to him. I was probably in tears or whatever. And I was just like, I just want to thank you for being obedient to sharing what was on your heart, because it really made a difference for me. And he then, like, introduced me to a bunch of these young adults, and he's like, go, like, oh, I want you to meet these guys. And then they invited me out to lunch after that. They bought my meal. Wow. And then after that, they're like, hey, do you want to go to Santa Monica Beach with us? Like, we're just going to go hang out there today. And so, like, the whole rest of the day I spent with them, eating, just getting to know these people.
Fellowshipping.
Yeah. And I felt very, like, I didn't have to really try to like do that. It was like, I could tell it was in their heart to extend a welcome and to practice love. And I really, I felt that love, and I felt that welcome. And so, and I could tell that, like, that the young adults pastor, he had also, his leadership was evident, because he had this whole group of people who were instilled with this kind of missional action, this kind of activism,
like faith
that was
in
like
action.
Yes. Yeah. It wasn't just a charismatic pastor.
Right.
It was like he was effective in actually loving his people to the point where they were reaching out to other people, and not just like, hey, try to come to our church. It didn't feel like I was just, they were trying to get me to come to their church.
He was actually doing the thing that you tried to do when you were a kid. His influence was actually influencing those around him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so then as I began to, there was a point where, I originally felt like the Lord had brought me to LA for film. And there were certain, like, verses. There's a whole thing I haven't talked about. I'll just say there's, like, a lot of confirmation that happened about even deciding to move there.
So more perfect timing, more perfect things.
And verses and things that, like,
clearly God speaking to you.
And but then once I got there, I had like my own like mini Abrahamic moment of
put your child on the altar.
Yeah, where I felt like I was then being asked to let it go.
Yeah.
To let that, which was so confusing because I was like, but wait, I really believe I heard correctly. And like,
but
that
God, you gave me this child. Like, this was a blessing. We talked about it. You were like, I'm going to give you a child. And you want me to sacrifice it? Like, yeah. This is very. And
so there was that moment. And I felt like what that meant was I needed to put it in his hands and not concern myself with it, and that
you can't control it.
Yes, and that there was other things that he wanted to develop in me, and I now believe that in order if you want to be like from a young child, you know, I had this urge to like be an influence, like to like have this sort of like impact on others, but I was not myself strong enough or strengthened to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think looking back at that time, I was not in a place to like have the fortitude.
You had the calling, but you didn't have the ability. Like the calling may have been there, but the ability, you may have had even the skills, but again, not.
I don't think I had the skills.
Right. It's kind of like being able to sing, but it doesn't mean you have all the skills that come with like someone who's a professional singer. Like, can you read music? No, but I can listen to that. Like, remember me? Like, I sang, but I just listened to the dude next to me, so I knew what I was singing. I didn't actually know how to read the music. It's kind of like that. I can come in here and I can imitate and I can fake it, but if you actually told me to read the music, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or and the example in the Bible that was very impressed on my heart is that of David, how God chose him to be the king, but he was not seeking after that.
Right.
He was not like, all right, life goals, I'm going to be the king one day. Yeah. Like, it was just so funny because like I grew up loving The Lion King and just saying, I just can't wait to be king. And that was totally like, that was the contrast. You know, we have David who's like just doing his thing, tending the sheep in the field. And then you had me who's like, I just can't wait to be king, you know? Yeah. And I felt like I really had to let that part of myself die of like seeking some kind of place of significance and influence and impact, and I needed to just be faithful to the small things that were put in front of me. Yeah. And that was going to be the test of whether I would ever be capable to manage anything beyond my own life. and because it was, I mean, my life up to that point had shown that I got good grades and everything, and I did, you know, things to the best of my ability, but like I even knew in high school, like there was a difference I could feel, you know, between, like you said, the piano students who were actually practicing, and I would have this feeling of dread in my heart because I knew I wasn't a true practicer who was dedicating hours of my personal time toward that craft. And you could see the difference between someone who had and someone who hadn't. And that was true.
And hear the difference.
Yes. And, you know, I play by ear, but like, and people would say, oh, you're just naturally talented. And it's like, well, and, you know, I wanted to become a person who is characterized by true devotion and not just my family line or, you know, these are the verses I learned growing up, or, you know, I can put on my smiling face and invite you or whatever. You know, it's like I really want to live that difference, and the only way to do that is to not be concerned with this external validation that is really just to appease my own ego and insecurity, you know? Yeah. And so I had to just forget about that. And so that was the example that I was seeking to follow after, was just being faithful with little. And so that led me to getting very involved with the young adults group, like setting up chairs beforehand and helping in just ways that we're just being a part of the community and contributing. And I kind of stopped like my acting stuff that I had been sort of dabbling in, and that, like, getting involved with the young adults group eventually led to that pastor inviting me and some others to be part of a church planting team.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so that was 3 years living in Burbank. I felt like at that point, there's a big difference in my sense of what I wanted to do, because I originally got there wanting to do film and, arts and stuff. And then I was in this point where, like, once he asked me that, I was like, there's really nothing more that I'd rather do. and that was the genuine place, because I had allowed myself to be cared for in ways that were profound that I hadn't really opened myself up to before. And I felt like there's no greater impact that you could have in someone's life than, like, how that kind of impact.
That's another testimony that you've also given towards scripture, of that when your heart's desires align with God's desires, he gives you those desires. And it's funny because it wasn't like the showbiz or that stuff where you desired those, but when your heart shifted to what he desired for you, and you're like, I want that, there would be nothing more that I want. And that's what he wanted for you. And he gave you that. And that's what you wanted. And that's a testament to that verse in play, literally there. When our heart's desires shift and align with what he wants for us, he'll give us that. He'll give us what he will give us our heart's desires when it's what he desires for us as well. You get to a point where now you're starting to feel like God knows you, not just you know God. Like, I know God, he's been there forever. He's been there all the time. But now you're starting to realize, like, not only is he there, he's really there. Like, you're in a relationship. You come back here. Eventually you come back here, and now you're still doing that. Like, you're still involved in all of that. But now you're doing it in multiple churches, not just one and stuff like that. Do you belong to just a church, or are you like the nomad church, like kind of like, do you feel like that you belong to a church right now, or do you like, or are you just kind of like, you're just like, I'm doing everything and anything I can be part of?
So after, when I was invited to do that church planting thing, right, he then brought us to the like headquarters of where he was raised, gotcha, which was a church that his father had started in the 80s, and he was discipled by Jack Hayford, and he like had this whole training ministry where the people would come from all over the world to be go through an internship and a residency there. And so I lived at this church for 3 years in Santa Cruz area. And that was another whole like journey and level. And that was what he was doing in advance to like preparing us to be a part of the church plant, right, was to live at this church and serve there and go back to sort of his roots of where he was taught. Right. And it was from there that eventually he had said, like that was bringing up a lot in our lives, mine and the other people who had said yes. Yeah. And eventually he's like, I understand if you just need to like not go on the church plant and just stay there to process what God is wanting to do in your life. And so that's what we actually did. Yeah. We stayed there and continued that process until eventually I moved off the campus, and I was just going to come home to Ottawa for a summer before I was going to go to San Jose State.
See, I'm curious how you got back here.
Yeah. So part of my department when I was living and working at that church was the youth, and there was actually in Ottawa at Bethel, the church where I grew up, they were seeking a youth director. And initially they presented it just as this summer
we need someone to come in and do this little thing.
Yeah, like a summer interim person. Yeah. And so originally I was just like, well, that's great, because I was planning on coming back because I hadn't really been home for a significant amount of time since I moved to California. And I was had just signed up to finish my degree in California. So I was like, before I go on to that whole venture and phase of life, I'm going to come home for the summer, spend some time here, but it would be great to work because I'll need that for expenses later. And so I came home to work at Bethel with the youth, and I felt like this is a perfect fit because like of everything that I've just been through. And being able to like speak to people who are in that age group, you know, that I was in
at
and
that exact
at that
moment
time,
when you left.
yes,
Yeah, this is like full circle now. I'm glad we did this because now it's coming full circle right here.
Yes. And so I went there, and it was like the beginning of July when I came here, and like a few days into the job, I just had a sense that like I was supposed to cancel my plans to go to college in California and move back here and like take this job. Yeah. And so eventually, after being in there for like a month or so, and it was going well, like the kids are seeming to have a good time. The leadership at Bethel was pretty stoked on it. They felt like it was bringing a lot of vibrance to them. And I felt like a sense of being able to apply these teachings that I had just myself been like digesting for the last 6 years. So we all felt like it was a good fit. And so I moved back, never did finish my degree. I canceled like 2 or 3 different university plans that I had while I was there. Wow. And so I came back here, and I worked in that role for a year or two, and then they eventually got a full-time like youth and family pastor, which was more of what they were ultimately looking for. And I didn't feel like this was going to be like a long-term thing that I was. It just felt like the right thing that I was supposed to do at that time. And so, but because they still offered for me to stay on staff, and they're like, we'd love for you to still be here. Like, what would you want to do? Like, if you could do anything. And so it's like, I think I'd like to do like worship music. Like let's work on, because that was another element that was very different from the church that I was raised in versus what I had experienced for the last several years. And worship, as I had recently experienced, I wanted to be able to bring some of that
more into that authenticity. It wasn't just just emotions. It wasn't just the routine.
And I will say that like what I think I encountered there was like that was where the road came to the point of there's a difference in theology, like in the church that I was raised.
Right. And that matters with worship too, like how churches approach worship.
Yeah. And it's different as to why I had experienced something different and why it was kind of difficult to implement that into the setting that I was in, because it was a difference in belief. And so it was almost like I probably couldn't fully go there in the setting that I was. And also just like their Sunday morning wasn't really designed in the similar way that made room for that.
The structure of the morning service didn't like allow for that.
And that's not to say that I don't think that we had some positive experiences and everything, but I realized at that point that and also during that time of the era of me as the worship leader there, that was also when I started to play out publicly with gigs and everything. And that was another aspect of the whole David story that I kind of felt like this isn't the whole arts thing is not going to happen until I was like set that I wasn't going to pursue it. Like if I got invited to do certain things, I would, if I felt like, I would accept.
If God opens the door, I'll say yes, but I'm not going around knocking on doors.
I just felt like I never felt permitted in my soul. And whether or not that was God, I kind of think that was God. It's possible that it was just my own hang up, but I don't know. But I just felt like this sort of prohibition against asking, because I felt like, and I think those kinds of directives are highly personal and specific. Like,
right.
I don't think, I'm not at all saying like, you know, if you reach out to someone for a gig, you're sinning. That, no way. And that's not at all. And it's kind of what you were saying about your music listening. Like, it's not to say anything against anybody else, but that was what I felt I needed to do. And so it wasn't until I had moved back to Ottawa that actually these doors started opening of like, hey, come play. And it was kind of similar to the feeling of being invited by the young adults to go out to lunch or to go to the beach. It was like the same kind of feeling of invitation, like, hey, come, like, be a part of this. Like, we'd love for you to,
we're doing a thing. Come on over.
Yeah, exactly. It was that kind of invitation. And so I started to say, and that was when I realized, like, even though I had this aspiration, I had absolutely no experience in like gigging or like performing out, you know, like there was a time when my brother had a Christian band, Feeding 5,000, and they would play at Jeremiah Joe, and maybe like I would come up and sing a song or like fine arts, but I'd never gigged like in public and so I was very new at that. And there's a lot for me to learn, and then I remember like getting my first 3-hour gig, and I'm just like, like that's so much time. And so that started happening, and I also started writing. I mean, I had written music since I was 12 or 13. That was when I first started, but then like I started writing more, I guess, like substantially when I was about 25 or so. I wrote some Christian kind of worship songs when I was in the setting in California, but when I moved back here, I started to work more with like imagistic kind of metaphors and things that weren't so direct and literal in the way that they were, you know, in California. And so as I started to write more original music, that was really what the doors seemed to be opening toward. And it just felt like I got to a point at the church where I was working where, you know, it just felt like that door was kind of, that was for this time, and that door was kind of closing and these doors were opening. And so I was just kind of sensitive to that sense of, it wasn't ever like, you know, anybody was like, get out of here. I was like, I'm out of here. You know, it was just kind of like, it felt like my time was reaching to a point where I had accomplished what I was there to do. And there was something more for me to
You go through
accomplish.
seasons, you know, and each season has its own theme music and everything. You know what I mean? Like every season is very unique. So what's next then? What's next for you?
Yeah. So, that's my focus now has been, writing and releasing original music.
Like original Christian music, or just original music in
just
general?
original music. I at this point, where I am in the art of it, I feel like it's all, it's all
so
his,
like you're
know?
I'm a Christian creating music, so therefore I'm a Christian artist, but it doesn't mean that I'm making something, a song that's specifically designed for only the Christian community.
Oh yeah, absolutely not.
That's exactly the way I am into, like, there's a difference between writing worship music, which is specifically for the Christian community, right? But then like when I write a song, I'm a Christian writing a song, you know? And so maybe that's how I'll write a song, from that point of view, or from a point of view of like loss, or like those things are still easiest for me to write from, because I have a lot of trauma, whatever you want to call it. Like I can easily write from places of like vulnerability, pain, nakedness of feelings and heart and stuff like that, and that can go outside of the Christian community and can be listened to by anybody. You know, anybody can listen to that and relate to that.
I would say that one of my inspirations for that was actually this pastor that I was speaking of in California, because the way that, besides just the quality and wisdom of the teaching, the way that I think it really got to my heart was that he was speaking about his life. He wasn't speaking about, so if you're doing, you know, if you're going through this, or if you're going, it was never about that. He was just sharing, opening what God was doing in his life. And it just so happened that like those very things that God was teaching him or doing in his life, the things that he was bringing him through were a medicine to those who would be hearing him.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that way with music as well, that like music for me is a lot of the times when my awareness has been opened and my heart has been opened, and it brings me to a new point of action. Like I'm going to do this differently, or I'm thinking this differently. And so it's very much like a service. And that's not to say that I believe that it's going to speak to everybody. It's like, I think whoever it can be good for, I hope that it can meet that person. If
people are wanting to hear some of the stuff that you're doing right now, how can they do that? YouTube, Instagram?
Yeah,
what?
I have a YouTube channel that's my name, Christina Eltrevoog. I also have Instagram. It's my Instagram handle is Eltrevoog, and it's Vogue like the magazine.
Okay,
so that you can kind of know. And
we'll put it down in the. We'll put I'll get it from you after, but I'll get all your links and I'll put it down in the description of this video too, so you guys can always just go down there and check it out. Do you have like music videos on there of like some of your original music and stuff on that?
Yeah, I've done. I've kind of saved my original stuff for when I started with covers, because I felt like while I'm learning how to make videos and stuff, I don't just want to waste it on my songs that I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I started with some covers, and I've done like at least one original music video, but I'm going to make some more. Okay. And I have some recorded and ready to be released.
Are you going to do an album too, probably here in the near future?
Yeah, I do have. I've done a couple. I have a Christmas EP. I have a couple duo projects.
Can we get those on like iTunes or stuff? Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Make sure we put those links down in the description. We will do that. So cool. I want people to be able to hear what it is that you're doing, and kind of like how I know you as a musician. So I want people to do that. And also I want to check out some of the original music too. So guys, definitely go there, hit subscribe on her YouTube channel, show her some love, leave some comments on some of her videos if you guys are actually watching and checking them out. That being said, we're going to kind of wind down then. People check out her YouTube. I got a Christmas gift for you, by the way, because it is that season. I'm not just wearing this reindeer sweater for no reason. All right, so what I got is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it's just a wall art thing for you to hang up.
That is so cool. That's one of my favorite quotes.
There's some MSMInk stuff in there too. So
thank you so much. I really, I ponder that often.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good. But I don't always do like repetitive prayer or anything like that. Like where I just like say a prayer that's like pre-written. But every once in a while, those things kind of lock in on you, and they almost become mottos. Yeah. And not just a prayer; it almost becomes like a way of living life when you like cognitively run those things through your head.
Yes.
And so I just thought that would be a cool little Christmas gift for
you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I have one for you as well.
Do you want me to open it, or do you want me to save it?
No, please open it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of relevant to our conversation. So this is it's a little Caralampia is a repurposed vessel oil lamp. So I make these oil lamps out of.
I feel like I need to be delicate.
Yeah,
okay.
I take these little different bottles. They're often spirit bottles, and I fill them with oil for to make a lamp out of it. So that's a wick.
I see
and
that.
You'll dip it, and you can light it on fire.
I should light it right now.
And this is a cross.
Thank you.
And it's actually, when I bought it, I picked it up and it broke. And so it has glue on it right now. It's still drying.
The paper's sticking to the glue a little bit.
But yeah, just be gentle. But I thought that's also kind of a metaphor,
I love it. Thank you so much. So this, I can just stick this in here, pop that in there, and it'll light?
And yeah, and you have to wet the wick, so get it all wet and then ignite it, and it's a repurposed.
That's so cool.
Filling an oil lamp.
And you did this?
Yeah.
What? This looks so
I mean, I didn't make
official.
the bottle.
No, but you got like
this
is all very professional, and you got your whole.
That was another thing I dabbled in was to supplement the music income to just make little oil
So if people
lamps.
want these, can they?
We have an Instagram. Yeah,
Do we have this? All right, so
we can do custom
I'm
ones.
gonna put her little Instagram there too. So that's it's Carla. How would you say it?
Caralampia.
Caralampia.
And that's
Caralampian.
Caralampian is the Caralampia was taken, so it's
gotcha.
Caralampian is the IG.
All right. Well, we'll put a link for that in the description as well, so you guys can go check all that out as well. This is very cool. I'd light it right now, but I don't have a lighter. But I would do it.
It's actually the name was inspired by a verse in Isaiah too, that the one that says you will no longer be deserted, but my delight will be in her.
Okay.
And that was like this illuminated by happiness is what Caralampia means.
I see that. Yeah, it's like the model underneath it, illuminated by happiness. I love it. I think that's great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, honestly, and I appreciate you getting to share your testimony with us. I learned a lot, and I feel like if there was people watching this, there's a lot of people that I feel like are going to relate to a lot of what you said, especially youth. Some teenagers. I feel like hopefully they get a chance to kind of see that, and even parents watching how it comes full circle. So if your kid's going through a kind of a crazy stage right now, just trust God, and really lean into that. Pray for your kid and stuff like that. Because look, you never know how things are going to work out. So from me, for those that know me, that's the same story here. So from a rated R testimony to where I am at now, to PG-13. I don't think yours was quite rated R. You're like, no, you have no idea. I kept this PG-13. All right. So, but yes, from the questionable lifestyles of us, Christian kids out there living in the world. Again, I'm so big on that scripture. Raise your kids in the ways of the Lord, and they will not turn from Him. And I think that is so important. And I think your dad played a huge role. Your whole family did. I know they did. But just even like how you talk about your dad and how he lived out his faith in front of you, clearly it was something that was influential and pinnacle. So I think that's really cool. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys like these faith dialogue conversations, be sure to hit subscribe. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you liked about this episode. What you didn't like. If I talked too much, you can tell me. If I talked too much, it's okay. I get it. I've seen that in the comments already. So I hear you. I try my best. Yes, but leave a comment. Tell us what you like. Tell us anything that if anything struck a chord with you guys, we'd love to hear about that, hear the feedback. Hit a like so we can beat the algorithms, and check out our website, www.msmink.com. We keep it pretty up to date, so there's a lot going on there, some blogs as well. And I think that's it. I think I'm running through like the the blog, subscribe, like, share. Yes, share, and share this video too on your Facebook and social medias or wherever you'd like. And we look forward to 2025 as we go into this new year. So we're closing this out. This will be the last episode of 2024. So what a way to close it. And I thank you guys for joining us all throughout the year. For those of you that were a part of this growing journey, I can't believe how fast it's grown. I can't believe where we are right now. So I'm super excited about 2025 and whatever is going on there, whatever God has planned. Like she made so evident today, we can lay out our steps, but it's God who's going to move it before us. I can plan to go to LA or go to college or whatever, and God's going to be the one to really line up our path for us. And I think that's also true with this podcast and ministry too. So I'm making plans. I am making big plans, but it is God who's ultimately in control, and I'm excited to see what He's doing. If you guys want to be a part of that, like I said, just join up with us, hit a share, hit a like, hit a subscribe, and we'll do it together. And on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a very Merry Christmas.
You as well.
And a Happy New Year.
Let your heart